Hey guys, Grisel here, and today we're talking about all the things, a life update, what's happening, writing, health, everything else. So let's get started. I will start with writing because I think that that's one of the things that has been most on my mind lately, like kind of like taking up all of my spare brain space. And if you followed my most recent update that I posted, this is going up in April, so it would have been, I think, early March. I finally started querying. I sent out my first batch of queries and I had to take a sort of like rip the band-aid off approach to this because I felt like I was stopping myself from doing it just because I was a little anxious still. The idea of cold emailing random strangers and being like, hey, here's this thing, do you maybe want to read it? Is still kind of hard to deal with. And not gonna lie, it was very hard even at that final moment, and it's not perfect. I know that my queries were not perfect and I kept sort of like fussing with them, but I came down to the realization that at that point it was just my anxiety. I am extremely anxious about like cold calling people. I avoid using phone calls, and to some extent like emailing random strangers feels similar to that. So I was anxious to the extreme and just kept stopping myself, so I had to just kind of get over it, suck it up, and do the thing. And I did, and I received rejections, of course, which I was expecting, and I kind of had wrapped my head around it to begin with because it's just part of the process of being a writer. And you know, your work is not for everyone. It's so subjective, and I'm a rational human being and I understand this. I was actually quite surprised, pleasantly so, to find that I did query 5 agents. I'm going in 5 agent batches and waiting in between because that's a number that I can handle with day job, life, all the other things. I don't like to sort of spread myself too thin, and I feel like keeping track of 5 queries at a time is manageable to me. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. I think to each their own, and this is kind of what works for me. So I did get responses. As of this recording, one I have not received a response for, but I don't expect one because that was one of the agencies that said if you don't hear in so much time, assume it's a pass. So I assume it's a pass at this point. I'm still within the time frame, but I'm just kind of taking it as a pass. So I actually found that they were so nice. I was expecting basic, you know, formulaic, this is not for us type responses, but at least 3 of the 5 were actually very nicely worded responses that actually had specific pointers for my first 10 pages or my synopsis or my query. So that was really helpful because thank you, that gives me something to work with in the future. So I won't name names, but if by weird coincidence or chance you are one of the agents that I queried and are watching this video now, thank you, because you were all very helpful. I received good feedback. I have applied the feedback I have received, and I am going to go into the next round of queries I feel stronger. So I think getting past that initial fear was crucial, and I don't feel quite so anxious anymore because the worst that can happen is that you get a no. And I know this because I work in a field where I do sometimes have to make proposals, and you know, I've done academic publishing. I know that you don't always get a yes. So I know rationally that rejection is just part of the game. So I wasn't too upset about that. It was just the anxiety of like being so transparent with what you're doing and just like setting yourself up in this way and showing this thing that I've been working on that few people have seen to random strangers and be like, please, do you want it? It is hard. It's not gonna lie, something that I'm probably gonna keep struggling with. I think every writer struggles with it, but I am mentally prepared, and I like that some of them gave me feedback. So I will take these rejections as positive criticism and move forward. I will just continue and revise and retweak where I need to. I am not doing full-on manuscript revisions at this point because like I said before, I feel like it is time for me to move on to other projects. If this is gonna happen, it's gonna happen, and if it's not, well, then we'll wait and see what happens. But in the meantime, based on feedback, I have tweaked, and that's, I think, a very good thing overall. If there's one thing that I do know and support and believe in, it's that you only get better at writing by writing, and one of the things is feedback. So there you go. So not so awful of a thing, even though still waiting, still trying, moving forward. But that takes me to my next project, which is my major project for April, which I kind of mentioned before, but I am coming back into writing a full manuscript, a semi brand new story. So what I mean by that is, again, if you watched my most recent update on sort of like dropping writing projects, this is a project that I started writing about 2 years ago now. Yeah, not the last Camp Nano, but the one before. And I dropped it for personal reasons I don't go into, but it had to do with my health. And I did not pick it back up again because I felt like it had gone in a direction that did not feel like what I wanted it to be. So I've come back with the original story. I've replotted, and I have found a very helpful tool this time around, and that is the Heart Breathings by Sarah Cannon. She has a whole series of videos that I will link down below. She's got a series of videos on plotting your novel and a worksheet that she has based on a few other writers' methods, including James Scott Bell's Plot from the Middle, or Write from the Middle, something like that is the name of his book, and his Superstructure book, and a couple of other how-to write manuals. So she's kind of like taken these ideas and put them all together. And even though I have a pretty established method for outlining, I'm always looking for new methods. I'm always looking to improve. Again, being a writer, you kind of have to write to the story. Every story is a little different, and my process changes slightly with each book. And I feel like it's a matter of evolving as a writer, but also evolving with the story. Some stories demand a little bit more of me, some just flow more easily. There was one that I wrote a very heavily detailed outline for, and that was great, but for this one it felt like I needed a little bit more freedom, but I wanted some structure and context. So I'm definitely not a pantser. I am all the way a plotter, but the extent to which I plot differs story to story. For this one, I already had that established idea, and I think it was still stuck in my head, so I wanted to kind of like refresh and take what I could, but turn it into what I really want it to be. So it is actually fairly different from what I originally started out with, beyond just the skeleton of the story. But I feel like the major points have flowed really well, and I am really looking forward to writing this story. I am excited about it in a way that I haven't been in a while, and also slightly anxious, and that's partly just because of the idea of diving into a story right from beginning to end. It's something I have not done in more than 2 years, because the last one was this one. Everything else that I've been doing is editing and reworking stories that have already been written. So the idea of starting fresh from scratch has me a little nervous.
Stop that.
So that's what I'll be doing in April. I use the Camp NaNoWriMo as a method to encourage me. I like having weird self-motivating deadlines, so Camp NaNoWriMo is a time that works for me in the same way that I use NaNoWriMo. I'm not aiming for a 50,000 word, but I am aiming for a 30,000 word, which would be about half of the novel. Overall, I'm aiming for about 65,000 words. It is young adult, and that's what I'm looking for in a first draft. So I would like to ideally have at least half of the piece written by the end of the month, and then continue on to May, maybe June, but sort of mostly considering June the time where I will be letting it rest and then reading the manuscript and seeing what it looks like and moving on from there. One of the things I do want to do and work on and improve this year is my editing time. I want to get better at that. I feel like that's where my big weakness is. Even though I like editing, I feel that it's slow. I'm an extremely slow editor, and I want to learn how to do that faster. I'm not a slow writer. I'm actually a fairly fast writer. At least I believe I am. And when I have enough time and I can focus, I can shell out a fair number of words. But going back and editing those words and concentrating on it sometimes takes me a lot longer than I would like it to, and that's where I really feel that my process needs work. So I am considering this an experiment to see how quickly I can actually get through a full manuscript and an edit for a brand new story. And we'll see how it goes, because I do feel that the project I'm currently querying, I was more of a discovery writer for that one, which is why it took so much editing to get it into a cohesive state, whereas with the most recent projects I've done, the last 2 projects that I've worked on from beginning to end, I had a much stricter outline, and I feel like that helped a lot. I have discovered that I do need that little bit of a stricter outline with a little bit of discovery in between, whereas being too free-flowing is not the greatest for me because it means way more editing in the end. So I'm going to see how my process looks after this, and that's my goal. So that's writing. Life-wise, health-wise, I just had an MRI done for a cyst, so I'm waiting for results from that. And I'm hoping that this doesn't affect my writing too much. I am waiting to see what my doctor says. I haven't heard back from them, so at this point I have no further information. But as I've talked about before, my health is definitely a factor in my writing ability. That is what affected me that last time. I had a major health crisis and that threw me off. So if my health isn't great, then I can't focus to write, and that's a thing. And I just kind of have to go with it and learn how to deal with the crises that happens, but I'm trying to be very realistic about this one. And again, using the heart breathings method, I downloaded Sarah Cannon's, I purchased and downloaded her, what she calls her HB90 plan, which is a 90-day quarterly goal planning system, and it's also been helping me a lot. And one of the things she talks about, and she actually has a whole section in the planner on looking realistically at your 90 days. And if you are a person who specifically suffers from chronic illness or things like migraines or other issues that you know will knock you out for a few days, to kind of try to average how many of those days are likely to happen and plan for those. So I have been doing that. I think being extremely realistic in that manner is making me think more long term about how I write. So we're gonna see how well that works. I am probably gonna do a video on what it's like to use her planning system and the plotting system, but I'm gonna wait until after I've put them into practice before I actually talk about them, or at least after I've seen the results of putting them into practice, because I've started working on the pre-planning stages, but I don't want to detail how great the experience was until I have finished the experience. So in the future, I will do a video on how I've adapted her method to my own needs, and I think it will be a really good thing for me. So that's what I'm going to do going forward. But other than that, you know, everything else is going well. I'm dealing with stuff, but that's it. So a little bit of an update. I'll probably do a post-nano update in May to let you guys know how the experience goes, how the process works out. And fingers crossed, I'll be sending out another batch of queries soon after I have finished all my little tweaks from the feedback I received the first time around. That is all I have. So I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one. Let me know how you're doing, and if you have any writing projects for the coming months, or if you're doing Camp NaNoWriMo, drop a line below, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.